I was sitting at the kitchen counter, the laptop open, credit card in hand, halfway through paying the registration for Milo's robotics camp. He'd asked me about it weeks ago. Eyes lit up, voice bouncing, and I'd said yes before even checking the tuition. That's what I do. That's what I've always done. The notification slid across my phone screen before I saw it. Just Darren's name. I tapped it open, thinking maybe he was confirming the drop-off time for Sunday, or asking about the allergy-friendly snacks I keep stocked for Mia. Instead, it was one sentence. Don't expect me to take care of you in old age. I have my own life and family. No greeting, no punctuation even. Just a dry wall of words that hit harder than any door ever could. I didn't move. I didn't speak. The laptop screen faded to black in front of me, the submit payment button waiting. It was still morning. The coffee beside me had gone lukewarm. Outside, the neighbor's dog barked once. The rest of the house was quiet. 3 nights ago, we had dinner. I'd made that lemon cake Darren always liked. He'd brought Jessica and the kids, and we'd sat around my table like we used to. I'd sent them home with leftovers and a bottle of that olive oil she likes. Nothing felt off. He kissed my cheek when he left. And now this. I read the message again, slower. My thumb hovered over the reply button, then pulled away. I set the phone down. I felt nothing at first. Not anger, not sadness. Just something dull and distant, like standing outside your own house and realizing someone has changed the locks. My hand found the mouse again. I completed the payment. Milo would get his camp. That was the easy part. The harder part was sitting there in that too quiet kitchen, wondering what part of me he had decided no longer mattered. Later that afternoon, I opened my browser again, but this time not for camp registrations. I logged into my online banking. I didn't reply to the message. Not that day. Not the next. There didn't seem to be a point. Instead, I opened my checking account. I knew what I'd find, but I needed to see it in one place. The roof repair had been first. Darren had called on a Sunday, said the leak was spreading into the hallway, that the kids were worried that Jessica was crying in the laundry room. I wired $12,000 the next morning. He said he'd pay me back in a few months. He never mentioned it again. Neither did I. Then came the bridge loan. Jessica's car had broken down. She was missing work. They couldn't afford a rental and daycare at the same time. I sent $7,000 and got a thank you text with a heart emoji. That was 2 years ago. There were smaller things, too. The tutoring sessions for Mia, the medical deductible last winter, the hotel when their furnace failed. But the last one stood out most. The tuition check. $400. Milo had been accepted into a private STEM program. Darren had said they were just short, that it would mean the world to him. I remember writing that check and slipping a birthday card into the envelope so it wouldn't feel like a transaction. He called it an early birthday gift. That's what he wrote in the memo line. Not loan, not partial tuition, just gift. I'd told myself I was helping. That's what parents do. You don't watch your children drown in bills and shrug. You offer a hand. That's how I was raised. Quiet responsibility. But looking at those numbers lined up like that, I couldn't ignore what they added up to, not just the money, but the shift. Darren used to ask. Then he started informing. And I started reacting. I was no longer part of their planning. I was their solution. And somewhere along the way, they stopped saying thank you. I opened a new document on my computer and titled it Albridge Financial Transfers. Then I pulled the last 5 years of statements. He showed up around noon the next day with a brown paper bag and that overdone smile I've come to recognize over the years. Too many teeth. Too much cheer. Thought I'd stop by? Darren said, stepping into the kitchen like nothing had happened. Got your favorite chicken salad on rye. Kids say hi. I didn't ask why he hadn't called. I just moved a few papers off the table and gestured for him to sit. He started unpacking the sandwiches, chatting like it was a casual Thursday. Jessica was stressed about work. Mia was doing well in math. Milo might want to try tennis. None of it stuck. His voice filled the room, but it didn't reach me. I let him talk. I let him fill the space. I watched his eyes scan the counters like they were looking for something. Maybe he was checking to see if I looked off. Unstable. When he paused long enough to take a bite, I asked the question plainly. Do you still have access to that old joint account we set up when your dad got sick? His chewing slowed just enough to notice. Then he swallowed and wiped his mouth. Oh, I don't really use it, he said. Just in case of emergencies? I nodded. That's what I thought. He kept talking after that about a friend's renovation project about the price of groceries, but it sounded like filler. My mind had moved on. That account was supposed to be temporary. A backup when Robert was in hospice in case I couldn't make it to the bank or needed someone to pay the mortgage. I'd forgotten it even existed. He hadn't. And if he was still watching it, what else had he been watching? I walked him out 20 minutes later. He hugged me like he meant it. I let him. As soon as his car backed out of the driveway, I went upstairs, opened my filing cabinet, and started pulling folders. That afternoon, I sat at the small desk in my study and dialed Thomas's number. I hadn't spoken to him in years, not since we updated my documents after Robert died, but his voice was the same calm, measured, familiar. Corinne, he said, it's good to hear from you. I need to restructure everything I told him. I didn't soften it. I didn't explain yet. My accounts, my estate plan, all of it. There was a pause, the sound of papers shifting on his end. All right, he said carefully. What's prompting this clarity? I replied. And it was the truth. For the first time in a long while, I could see my situation without excuses or sentiment attached. I wasn't angry. I wasn't emotional. I was simply done being careless with my own life. We talked through options. A living trust to hold the house and my investment accounts. A new checking account in my name only. Closing the joint account Darren still had access to. Updating beneficiaries. Tightening language, removing ambiguity. I don't want drama, I said. I want distance. With guardrails. Thomas hesitated then. I could hear it in his breathing. Will this cause conflict with your son? If it does, I said evenly, it's because the conflict already existed. I'm not creating anything new. He didn't argue. He never does. Instead, he laid out the steps, the timelines, the paperwork. We scheduled an appointment for later that week. When I hung up, my hands were steady. I didn't feel brave. I felt practical. That evening, I made myself a simple dinner and ate it standing at the counter. I didn't check my phone. I didn't reread Darren's message. I didn't need to. The decision had already taken shape. Before bed, I opened my laptop again and began listing every account, every policy, every document tied to my name. It was more than I realized. Years of careful building. Years of quiet responsibility. By the time I shut the computer, I knew exactly what I would say when Darren noticed the first change. 3 days passed without a word from Darren. I almost believed he hadn't noticed anything at all. Then just after noon on Thursday, my phone buzzed while I was folding laundry. Hey, did you transfer something? The message read. I saw a payment to your lawyer. Everything okay? There it was. Confirmation, neat and undeniable. I set the phone down, finished pairing the socks, then picked it up again and typed a single sentence. Just updating some documents. I didn't add a smiley face. I didn't add reassurance. I sent it and went back to my routine, though I noticed my movements had slowed, as if my body were listening more closely than my mind. He called that night. Not immediately, an hour after dinner, once the kids were presumably in bed. His voice was calm, almost gentle, the way it gets when he's trying to sound reasonable. Mom? He said, I don't want to jump to conclusions, but I saw that charge, and it worried me. I'm fine, I said. A pause. Then carefully, you're not thinking of cutting us out, are you? Us. Not him. Not even the kids. Us, like a unit with shared entitlement. Cut you out of what, Darren? I asked. The silence stretched. I could hear his breathing on the other end, measured and controlled. He didn't laugh it off. He didn't answer. And in that space, something shifted for me. The question had landed exactly where it needed to. He cleared his throat. You know what I mean. We just want to make sure everything's normal. Things are very normal, I said. I'm organizing my affairs. It's responsible. Well, he said, the word edged with caution. Big changes like that usually involve a conversation. I didn't respond right away. I let the quiet do the work for me. I have to go, I said finally. It's been a long day. After I hung up, I sat on the couch and stared at the blank television screen. The call hadn't been about concern. It hadn't even been about me. It had been about access. And now that he knew something was changing, it was only a matter of time before he showed up to see exactly how much. He came on a Saturday morning earlier than usual. No text, no call, no kids. No paper bag of sandwiches in hand, just Darren standing on my porch with a look that said he was trying to appear calm and failing. Mom, can we talk? I stepped aside and let him in. He walked past me without waiting like he had when he was 16 and wanted to prove he lived there more than I did. He didn't take off his jacket. His eyes scanned the room, once then landed on the folder I'd left on the table. The Corinne Albridge Living Trust. He blinked at it, then turned to me. I don't understand why you're doing this. I stayed by the doorway, arms loosely folded. You made it clear. You have your life. I'm simply protecting mine. His mouth opened, closed. Opened again. This isn't fair. I sat down calmly. Is fair what you were thinking when you lied about Jessica's mother needing surgery? His face changed. Not in shame, he looked caught. Not sorry. That wasn't a lie, he muttered. It was exaggerated. No, Darren. It was false. And you took money based on it. He turned red. It was one time. I didn't reply. There was no point tallying up every withdrawal, every excuse. He started pacing, then his voice rising in volume and speed. You're punishing us. You're cutting us out, and for what? Because I said one stupid thing in a text. You meant it, I said. You meant every word. And I heard you. That's not what I meant. I was frustrated. I didn't mean you. You meant exactly what you said. He stopped pacing and looked at me like I had done something unspeakable. We're your family, he said, voice lower now, almost accusing. You don't do this to family. I looked at him for a long time. Family doesn't treat each other like contingency plans. He didn't answer. He just stood there breathing hard, staring at the folder like it might catch fire if he glared hard enough. When he finally left, he didn't say goodbye. On Monday, the letter from his attorney arrived. 2 days passed in silence. No calls, no texts. I almost hoped that meant he'd decided to let things settle. Then the letter arrived. It wasn't from Darren directly. It was from a law firm downtown, thick paper, careful language. I read it once, then again, more slowly. A formal request for a cognitive assessment. Polite phrasing, clinical concern, an implication wrapped in courtesy that my recent financial decisions suggested diminished capacity. I felt something tighten in my chest, not fear, not panic, but a sharp, offended clarity. I called Thomas immediately. They're questioning my competency, I said. They want an evaluation. Thomas exhaled long and controlled. I expected this, he said. We'll comply, but we'll choose the doctor. I won't refuse, I said. I have nothing to hide. That's the right approach, he replied. Refusal looks defensive. Cooperation looks confident. After we hung up, I sat at the kitchen table and stared at the letter. I'd raised a child, managed a household, built savings from a single income, paid off a mortgage, buried my husband, navigated grief without collapsing. And now, because I'd decided to protect what was mine, they wanted to suggest I wasn't well. The insult ran deeper than I expected. It wasn't just about the money. It was about authority, about who was allowed to decide when my judgment stopped counting. Somewhere along the line, independence had become suspicious. I gathered my medical records that afternoon, annual checkups, clean results, notes from my physician confirming my health. I placed them in a folder next to the trust documents. That night, I slept soundly. The next morning, I made a list of court-approved specialists Thomas had emailed me and scheduled the appointment myself. If they wanted proof, I would give it to them clearly, calmly, and on my own terms. The appointment was at 9:30 on a Tuesday. I arrived 10 minutes early, sat in a waiting room filled with pastel chairs and old magazines, and reminded myself not to take any of it personally. Still, my hands were folded tighter than usual. Dr. Melissa Hoyt met me at the door, introduced herself plainly, and led me to a quiet office with no windows. Her tone was neutral, but not cold. She didn't treat me like a patient. She treated me like a checklist. We started with basic questions, orientation, memory reasoning. She gave me a short passage to read and summarize, asked me to recall a list of words 10 minutes after hearing them. We did logic puzzles. She had me interpret proverbs, name the current president, count backwards by sevens. I answered everything without pause. No stumbles, no confusion. I'd been a school administrator for almost 30 years. My brain hadn't gone anywhere. Then came the document review. She'd already seen the trust paperwork, the power of attorney revocation, the account closures. She asked about the sequence, the rationale, the names involved. I reviewed my financial exposure, I said. I removed shared access. I moved my assets into a structure that cannot be contested by anyone who may have a financial interest in me dying. Dr. Hoyt looked up from her notepad, then down again. At the end, she closed the folder and took a breath. Mrs. Albridge, I'll file the formal report by the end of the week, but I can tell you this much now. You're lucid, rational, and fully capable. Their petition won't hold. I nodded once. Thank you. She hesitated, just for a moment. You're not the first woman I've evaluated under these circumstances. I don't imagine I will be the last, I said. By the time I left the building, I felt lighter, but not relieved. It wasn't about proving myself to a stranger. It was about understanding what had become necessary. I called Thomas from the car. We're ready for whatever comes next. And 3 days later, the court date was set. The hearing moved faster than I expected. The judge reviewed the documents without ceremony, the assessment report, the trust paperwork, the account changes, then picked up her glasses and looked directly at Darren. Mr. Albridge, she said, you sent a message to your mother stating, "Don't expect me to take care of you in old age. I have my own life and family." That was your position? Yes. Darren shifted in his seat. I was upset. Do you deny sending it? The judge asked. No, he said quietly. The room went still. The judge nodded once, as if something had finally aligned. The medical evaluation shows no impairment, she said. Your mother's financial decisions are consistent, reasoned, and within her legal rights. The petition for incompetency is denied. She struck the gavel, already moving on to the next case. Just like that, it was over. Outside the courtroom, Thomas gathered his papers and gave my shoulder a brief, reassuring squeeze. Darren stood a few steps away, his face tight, with something that wasn't grief and wasn't relief. As I passed him in the hallway, he leaned close enough for only me to hear. You'll be alone one day, he said. Don't come calling. I kept walking. I didn't turn around. His words didn't land the way he intended. They didn't sting. They didn't scare me. They felt familiar, like something I'd already been living with for years. By the time I reached the exit, the air outside felt different. Not lighter, clearer. I drove home in silence, the radio off my hands, steady on the wheel. When I pulled into my driveway, the house looked the same as it always had. Solid. Quiet. Mine. I unlocked the door, stepped inside, and set my keys on the table, already aware that the hardest part of this wasn't winning in court, but deciding what came next. Weeks passed. No calls, no emails, no footsteps on the porch. For the first time in years, my phone stayed silent through weekends. The calendar on the fridge, once marked with birthday dinners and school concerts, was blank now. But it wasn't empty. It was clear. Then one envelope. No return address. Inside a single photo, Charlie and Lily standing in front of a pumpkin patch, both smiling like they had no idea a war had happened behind them. No note. No explanation. I didn't frame it. I didn't throw it away. I slipped it into a drawer with the trust documents folded beside the last will and closed it softly. I didn't respond. Not out of anger, but because nothing had changed. The lines had been drawn not in heat or fury, but in cool, necessary ink. I went for a walk instead. The leaves had turned the sidewalks crisp with their sound. My pace was steady, not rushed. There was peace in not defending myself, not explaining, not chasing clarity from people who had stopped seeing me clearly a long time ago. Everything was in place now. The trust had been finalized, the new accounts set up, the medical files notarized, my intentions filed where no petition could touch them. It turns out you don't have to slam a door to close it. You can turn the lock once gently and walk away. In the quiet that followed, I found more than solitude. I found space. Not to grieve, but to reimagine. When I got home, I made tea. I opened the back door and let the light in. There was a moment, a soft one, where I almost picked up the phone. But I didn't. Instead, I sat down with a pen and wrote a letter. Not to Darren, not to Jessica, not even to the children, to myself, for the woman who had given without counting, who had loved without boundary, who had finally chosen peace over guilt. And by the time I finished writing, I knew what I needed to do next.